This workshop goes back to 1497, and it started in a small workshop over what is now in the High Street area. And all that happened was that whoever, it's either family or whoever was senior journeyman, as the person older retired, he had the chance of buying the business. And it's just gone on like that until today. Through one of my father's friends, who was a jeweller, one of the big jewellers in Glasgow, he said, well, there's a silversmiths and the man's partner is retiring. Why don't you ask? So went and saw it was Mr. Fletcher, it was Angel and Fletcher. And he said, well, I can't really afford a full apprenticeship at your age. So I did a bit of funding for the first bit, but it was 7.5 years I did, and that was really it. Almost like a Victorian silversmith rather than an art school silversmith. Yeah. So I do everything, big stuff, right down to the smaller churchware, refurbish it.
When I went to art school in 1983 with the idea to be a painter, but my second subject that I chose in second year was jewellery, and I found that I was drawn to that far more than the kind of the painting, drawing and painting kind of side, and just kind of working in metals and wood and plastics and resins and all sorts of things was something that I hadn't really thought about before, and I just it was something that really I felt that was more me than the painting and the drawing side of things. I ended up working in Easter House with young people for about 6 years, and I was working with heroin addicts and alcoholics doing art projects. And one day I got my jewellery tools out and we started making kind of rings, and some of them would stamp mum and things onto the kind of rings, and they'd go home, give this ring to their mother, and the mother would be sort of blown away by the fact that her son had made this, and he'd come back full of confidence and renewed vigour for what he was doing and make another ring with his girlfriend's name stamped on it. And I liked the kind of issue-based building confidence up with people that had been having lots of hard knocks in life. And that made me kind of think that there was more to just making jewellery to sell, to adorn sort of middle-class women that could afford to buy it. So that's what made me get into the idea of teaching it.
In those days, it was the end of this, this trade's dying out. People aren't interested in serving apprenticeships. So really, late 70s, 80s was probably running at the peak, because you were doing work for the front shops, you didn't do work for the public. It was all for the front shops. So they would send pieces up to whether to be repaired, restored, or ask you to make something. So say you were making something which is now Mappin & Webb, say a bowl, you would hallmark it with their mark, not yours. And then it was sold. You weren't allowed, if they caught you dealing with the public, you were blacked.
I learn as much from my students as my students, I suppose, learn from me. And even though you might be doing a technique for a long period of time, putting the same piece of metal through a roller, the students will discover something quite new that I've not seen before. And that keeps me kind of fresh and interested in what they're doing, and we kind of bounce off each other quite a lot. I think it's not maybe like glass, where you're dealing with glass, or ceramics is kind of ceramics. We use glass and we use ceramics, and we use every known material known to mankind, both precious and non-precious. And that's a lot of scope that we're working in 2D, 3D. We're using cutting edge technology. We've got a sort of £30,000 3D printer through there. We use laser welders, laser cutters. So we're using lots of skills that engineering and industry's crying out for, but we're using it in a very small scale. So I'm learning all the time, and through that learning, I then take that learning and give it back to the students. So it's a kind of a cycle that you go through, and it never stands still.
The whole trade has been affected in this country, where people would get tea sets. If you were getting married, somebody would have probably given you a silver tea set or an EP tea set. These aren't given anymore. So the market, the decline for that, if people want it, they get them made abroad. We have a problem now where there's one company I know who can get nurses buckles. They can get them made in India, sent from India to here, hallmarked in Edinburgh, for less than I could buy the piece of raw silver. Our material costs, not only do you have your VAT, but the bullion people now charge what they term a milling charge. So that really is 20%, another 25%. So already your base metal is expensive. So that's why they're winning at what they're doing. But also it's changed. It's just changed.
I kind of like this whole building in a way from many aspects. People kind of hate sort of brutalist architecture, but if you're making large pieces of silversmithing or bashing metal, you're making a lot of noise. The light here is coming from the wrong direction for jewellers because we can't really see the colour of the flame so well. So just a kind of, there's lots of dust and stuff that's been created over many years of creating in here. So we're going to be a clean environment, different tools and some new machinery I think as well. And I think a kind of a fresh approach as well to some of the teaching and some of the use of the space will be good, because I've been here 15 years and the space gets a little bit tired as well. You don't quite notice the passing of time and how dusty things are becoming. So I'm looking forward to a new regime. It might be too clean for me because I'm not maybe not the cleanest person in the world, but I think the advantages will definitely outweigh the disadvantages, put it like that.